Good evening. I'd like to apologize firsthand for my cough and my cough drop. I have horrible allergies. So it is an honor to be here with you all tonight. Prayer and share groups in prison encourage something that is quite rare behind bars: healthy, faith-based relationships with other people, and even more important, a deeper and more meaningful connection to God. As someone who spent decades in just such a place, I can testify as to the necessity of those bonds. They are both life-sustaining and life-changing. In 1987, at the age of 21, I was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Back then, there was only one prison in Virginia for women. Is that me? The Virginia Correctional Center for Women. It was very old, and it lacked a perimeter fence. I was a maximum security inmate, or C custody. Anytime I left the housing unit, I had to be handcuffed to a waist chain and shackled. But these are only the bare facts of my life, facts that could be read in my official record or the prison rule book. What isn't in any state file are the emotional and spiritual struggles that I faced, including depression and anger. I felt very alone and unsure about my future. When I first got to VCCW, Kairos was a relatively new program that C custodies were not allowed to attend because the walks and reunions were held in an area of the prison with very minimal security. So the only things I knew about Kairos came from word of mouth, which is not always the most reliable form of communication. I knew about the cookies too. I dreamed of those cookies for years. Life at that time was very limited to me. Because I was C custody, everything was brought to the building where I lived: medicine, school, food, visits. This meant we missed out on a lot of programs and events, including church and Bible studies. Off and on over the years, different groups would try to infiltrate the C custody building, but it never lasted. During my first year there, I was given a Bible by an elderly woman who was going home, and I read it every day by myself. I knew it would enrich my life, but I needed relationships with other people of my faith in order to understand what I learned. I had some friends, but was still very lonely in that regard, and that, coupled with my depression and anger, made my first decade very difficult. In the spring of 1998, I was transferred with all the other C custody women to a shiny new prison built just for us, complete with a perimeter fence. We were excited to go to Fluvanna Correctional Center for Women because it meant no more handcuffs and shackles and no more exclusion from religious or educational programs. I felt liberated. I was able to go to church in the gym on Sundays, and I have to tell you, it lit a fire in me. I love being around other women who love going to church and talking about it. Now, this was not an all-the-time thing, however. Something was still missing. I just didn't know what. The chaplain offered classes and groups, and I joined a weekly Bible study, and life settled into a routine. Not too long after the one-year anniversary of our arrival at FCCW, rumors started to circulate that Kairos was coming. I would finally have a chance to go. I was incredibly excited, even if it was just a rumor, because I'd only ever heard wonderful things about it, and cookies. But I got it in my head that because I was still a C custody, I wouldn't be allowed to go. The population now included lower security level inmates, and I figured they would be the ones allowed to go. For once the rumors were true, an officer came into our housing unit one night and said she was putting the Kairos thing sign-up sheets on the desk. It was much later in the month when I actually found out that everyone could attend, so needless to say, I missed out on that first walk. But I got a cookie. That next spring, Kairos came again. The sign-up sheets were put out, and I was one of the first to turn mine in. The only problem was I didn't get picked. This was horrifying to me. How could I not get picked? Can you imagine my disappointment? I had heard firsthand stories about this amazing 4-day weekend with some of the most wonderful women on the planet. I heard about the genuine caring these women gave unconditionally, the singing, and how no one felt judged or excluded because of what they did or did not believe. I was incredibly disappointed that I couldn't go. I was still going to church, but I had left the Bible study. I felt alone and adrift. The spiritual relationships I craved weren't there, and I just knew I needed to be in Kairos. It pulled at me, in spite of how secretive people were about what actually went on. In the fall of 2000, I turned in what I had decided would be my last sign-up. If I didn't get picked for the October walk, I wasn't going to try anymore. Ironically, at the previous prison, Bucannon, I signed up every year, just hoping that maybe something would change, that they'd let me go. But now things had changed for me, and I felt ready to give up. So after I turned in my last application, I told myself it was no big deal, and I pretended like I didn't care. But let me tell you, when I got my welcome to Kairos letter, I made an idiot out of myself in the day room. I laughed, I cried, I did a little dance. I was so happy to be chosen for this mysterious, apparently life-altering group. And when Kairos Walk number 3 at FCCW finally arrived, I was surprisingly nervous. I had no idea what I was getting into. I just knew I had never heard one single negative word about it. No one had ever let on about what really happened. The prayer chain, the forgiveness ceremony, the agape bags, the cross ceremony. I'm sorry. The cross ceremony, followed by that powerful closing. None of it was linked, which is remarkable when you think about the environment we're talking about. The first night I met my sponsor, of course, and the other Kairos team members. I saw some familiar faces and a lot of new ones, other inmates. I remember how thrilled I was to be involved and touched by how genuinely kind everyone had been. I couldn't wait to get going with the rest of the walk, and what a weekend it was. It truly was as life-altering as everyone said. The forgiveness ceremony literally rocked my world. I cried so hard, it was awesome. There, surrounded by loving, faith-inspired people, I started to understand so much. I found what I had been missing for so long: fellowship. There wasn't one moment that I didn't feel connected to the Kairos community, even when I was sitting alone, being quiet. To say that experience was powerful is completely inadequate. The human language cannot describe my peace and my joy. How do you explain a mind-bending jolt of spiritual reality to someone who hasn't experienced it? You can't. All you can do is walk the talk. At Fluvanna, Kairos was allowed to come in once a month for the reunions, twice a year for the walks, and twice a year for the 2-day retreats. When I was asked to speak tonight, I learned that in some prisons, Kairos is allowed to come in every week to hold prayer and share groups with the Kairos residents. I think that's so important, and I'm very happy to hear that some facilities have so many opportunities to nurture these vital relationships. But if I'm being honest, a part of me also felt sad that Fluvanna doesn't get to experience that part of it too. So many women need exactly the kind of bonds that Kairos provides. At the instructional, we were encouraged to join a small prayer group so we could continue to share the love and support that we found during the walk. Unfortunately, this proved to be a challenge because the women that I attended the walk with were scattered all over the prison. I rarely saw them. In fact, I was the only one from my wing who went to that walk. I had no idea how to get a group of my sisters on this journey together with me to pray and share. And there was also a problem with gathering in general because the institution didn't allow inmates to congregate. Smaller groups could usually meet discreetly in the day room without concerning security, So I managed to get a small Bible study together there in the wing. Mostly it was me and some of my friends reading our Bibles and discussing questions and praying together. Eventually I was selected by my fellow Kairos sisters as the reunion leader, and it was wonderful. I loved it. I encouraged everyone who wanted to speak, and I always looked for volunteers among those who rarely got picked for anything. I wanted people to feel as connected to the Kairos community as I did. In time, my little Bible study in the housing unit faded away. People came and went, and I struggled to find folks who were interested in that sort of thing. I joined a few groups through the chaplain's office, but was never able to find the right fit. When I met with them, I never felt like I was part of something so much as just there for 90 minutes. So I quit venturing outside of the Kairos community. And for the better part of 10 years, I was a dedicated and enthusiastic member. I felt my faith grow stronger as I surrounded myself with my Kairos sisters. I never missed a reunion, whether I was the leader or not. And whenever there was a walk, I signed up to be an angel and was fortunate to be picked nearly every time. I always asked for Saturday because of the forgiveness ceremony. It had been so liberating for me. I must have watched an entire tree's worth of those little rice papers dissolve in that water. Every single time it affected me just as deeply as it did that first time. And it was one of my favorite talking points with new Kairos members because it affected them in a profound way as well. Prison is hard. It's cold and unyielding and unforgiving. And it's not okay to be unique. It's lonely, depressing, and isolating. But in all that darkness, there is still a light that is gifted from person to person through the prayer and share groups. I believe that a Kairos member is like a lit match in a pitch black room. The light may seem small, but compared to its surroundings, it's like the sun. I could spot another Kairos sister a mile away just by her countenance and the cookie crumbs all over the front of her shirt. I've come a long way since I was that frightened 21-year-old grappling with a life sentence and a slim chance of parole. When I first entered the system, I was young and naive. My sentence stretched out in front of me like a never-ending nightmare. And trying to navigate the perils of it alone was torture, and I couldn't handle it on my own. Nothing I'd ever experienced before my arrest prepared me for my new reality. I was wandering around, lost in all that darkness, when I saw a small light in the distance. The women of Kairos, both volunteers and residents, gave me the courage to open my mouth and ask for help. I began to heal by praying and sharing with others in small groups going through the same sort of torture that I was. And though limited and rare, through prayer and share groups, I was able to talk about the things I was struggling with, trying to deal with within the context of my faith. And it was truly the best thing I could have ever done. And without Kairos, it never would have happened. It can only be considered a miracle that I'm home now for 2 years. It is the most wonderful thing ever, but I'm not suggesting that it's easy. I work and take care of my mother who has Alzheimer's. And I thank God every day with her. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to see any of the free Kairos ladies that I know because I am still on parole. Rules are rules, but no worry, DOC gave me permission to be here. And let me just say, I had no idea that the director was going to be here or that I was going to be seated with him. I've lost my place, I'm sorry. I miss my Kairos friends very much, but I also realize how important it is for them to continue to go into the prisons. So many women still need to learn that they are loved, and I want them to benefit from the same healing relationships that transformed my life. Finding that connection, not just to the Kairos ladies, but to the other residents, is vital to getting through your sentence. It's manifested among us through the prayer and share groups. I've received so much insight from those I've shared my faith with. A long time ago, I once said that when you first enter the system, you are faced with a choice. You can either survive or succumb. Years later, after my release, a friend kindly corrected me. He said he thought it went a bit further than just those two choices based on how I handled my time. Survive, succumb, or thrive. At first, I thought that was an odd thing to say about doing time, thrive in prison. But when I look back over the years of my incarceration, I am able to see that that is what I did. I thrived. I grew up wanting to be a teacher. In prison, I worked as a teacher in some capacity the entire time I was locked up. I got my associate's degree, and I am a certified Braille transcriber and proofreader. And that is the coolest thing I've ever done. But more importantly than the incredible education opportunities prison gave me, I worked hard to become mentally and emotionally healthy. My relationships with my family were healed, and I was blessed to find the most amazing friends ever, one of whom is with me tonight. I didn't do this alone. No one can reach that destination by herself, and my experience was sustained not only by those I met face to face, but by the people who nurtured and inspired those who did that for me. And all of this is firmly planted in a living, breathing relationship with Jesus that for me has its roots in Kairos. I thank you all for letting me be here and for all the other wonderful gifts that you've given me. And it has been my honor, sincerely. Thank you.